Well, I actually have a picture on my cell phone of 2 actual ETs.
Okay, do you have these pictures right now?
Yeah.
Can you show them on the camera?
Oh, I'd have to fish them out, but yeah, they're pretty amazing, actually. So this is one, and you know, he very triangular shaped head, almost like a beak-like face. It was at an event we did out in the Arizona desert a couple years ago. There were about 30 witnesses to this. This photograph was taken with a really good Nikon camera. So a person took a picture of it. Now this was under low light conditions, but it's very clear what it is, and it's an extraterrestrial being that's sort of levitating, floating out in the desert just outside our circle. So yeah, we have a lot of unusual material.
Is the Madonna with St. John. Dating back to the 15th century, this iconic painting is arguably one of the most debated depictions of alien life on Earth. Likely painted by Domenico Galileo. I mean, there is debate there too, but that's another story. However, as you can see, it depicts the Madonna with baby Jesus and St. John. However, if you zoom into the top right corner, you'll notice something very strange. There is an unnamed man shielding his eyes from what looks like a bright light in the sky, and beside him is a dog staring up at the same shining object. The object appears to be strangely similar to most modern depictions of a UFO, painted as a dark oval with light rays shooting out from every angle, and has definitely been the subject of much debate among alien believers and non-believers for decades. Now, it wasn't unusual for the time to paint angels or other celestial beings brightly shining down on us from the sky, but as this specific painting appears to have no such addition to the light and is simply a strangely specific flying saucer, it has led many to believe that the painter was depicting a real-life alien sighting. And truth be told, it wasn't the first time such things showed up in artwork, and it is also not the last. Could it really be a UFO? I don't know, you tell me. Coming in at number 9, coins. During a house renovation in Egypt, a group of workers say that they found 2 coins that had very unusual portraits on them. The first they found resembles the head and shoulders of an alien, while the other looks more like it depicts an alien spaceship landing, and they immediately freaked out. Plus, one of them apparently had the words opportunus adest carved on the back, which is Latin for there is an opportunity, which definitely comes across a little spooky. I won't lie, there's a lot of debate around the validity of these coins. As many have pointed out, the coins could have easily been manipulated by believers, but it has been countered by the fact that either way, there's no actual concrete proof that they don't come from aliens. I mean, I have some questions. Would aliens even use currency like us, let alone physical currency? I honestly have no clue, but I mean, if I came across these coins, I too might be just as suspicious about their origin. Coming in at number 8, the Second Punic War sightings. During the Second Punic War, which occurred in ancient Rome between 218 and 201 BC, there were apparently many sightings of strange sky phenomenon that today believers claim were aliens coming down to Earth. These alleged sightings were found in the Annales Maximi, which is essentially a historical record kept by the chief high priest during the Roman Republic, and in it is the tale of a day in 218 BC where ships that apparently gleamed in the sky came out of clouds and stayed floating in the sky. And I mean, I don't blame anyone for jumping to an alien conclusion on that one. Then, 2 years later, in 216 BC, a similar sighting was documented where large, gleaming round shields allegedly traveled through the air. Conspiracy theorists have clung on to these writings, pointing out how both descriptions can easily be imagined as the common UFO described in our modern era. Plus, this war was not the only one in history to claim such things happening in the sky. I mean, just like everything else on this list, will we ever know if the writings in the historical record really were an alien sighting? Probably not, unless we can figure out a time traveling situation, but it is a little suspicious, I would say. Coming in at number 7, Egyptian hieroglyphs. There's a lot of debate around alien involvement in ancient Egypt, and aside from the eternal debate of if aliens helped build the pyramids, hieroglyphs depict just about the most suspicious signs of extraterrestrial help. Now, I'll be the first to say that I don't think all hieroglyphs point towards ancient alien invasion, but that doesn't mean that there aren't a few that raise an eyebrow. One in particular is a hieroglyph appearing to show the Egyptians in possession of electricity, which, if that were true, feels like a surefire sign that they were not alone down here. The tableau depicts what appears to be people holding an electric lamp or maybe a light bulb, and believers have not wasted any time adding this to their Rolodex of reasons. And it's not just electricity that ancient Egyptians may have possessed, but other hieroglyphs seem to portray other forms of advanced technology that, in theory, they would have no way of knowing about. Hieroglyphs with a spooky resemblance to helicopters or planes have been found and gone viral, only adding to the mystery of how on earth this could have been something they would possibly know about. Could it be that aliens came down and gave them knowledge to advance their technology? Could the alleged airplane drawings be a UFO they saw in the sky? Conspiracy theorists say absolutely.
Number 6, Viking Mars. Now let's get into some more sciencey factual stuff. When people think of aliens, the term that might often come to mind is Martians, being attributed specifically to aliens that reside on the planet of Mars. NASA has sent a lot of things out there, and one expedition was referred to as Viking, them sending out little robots to take readings of the planet. One test that they performed was done on the soil, mixing soil with radioactive carbon-labeled nutrients to see if they would produce radioactive methane gas, this being a chemical sign of life on other planets. And it did, the test coming back with a positive result and finding organic molecules. But NASA just brushed it off, I guess, because they said that the other experiments didn't end up with the same results, so they just said it was a false positive. But one of the original scientists and others who have analyzed the data stand by their discovery, saying that the other experiments had just been ill-equipped for performing the tests and finding the same results. Number 5, Martian fossil. Let's hear from NASA again, this event taking place in 1996 when they announced that they had found a Martian fossil. They said that they had found fossilized microbes within a lump of Martian rock, a meteorite that is theorized to have been blasted off the planet around 15 million years ago before finally winding up in Antarctica, where it was discovered 12 years prior in 1984. They analyzed it a lot, of course, and found organic molecules as well as small bits of the mineral known as magnetite, which can sometimes be found in Earth bacteria. Researchers also said that under an electron microscope they were able to see traces of nanobacteria. So it seems like evidence is continuing to stack up that other planets are, or used to be, capable of sustaining life. And with a universe as infinitely large as ours, it's hard to say that it's impossible that life on other planets could ever exist. Number 4, the Super Hornet. Let's now take a look at another piece of evidence that came out following the Pentagon's acknowledgement of their Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. This took place back in 2015 on the East Coast and is another video of evidence discovered by the US Navy, this time by a FA-18 Super Hornet, a strike fighter that reaches speeds of up to 2,000 kilometers an hour. That's pretty fast. The pilots see the unidentified object moving at incredibly high speeds over the water and they struggle to keep up but are finally able to get a lock on it. When they do, they start cheering and one even says, "What the F is that thing?" They continue to follow it and seem to be unable to figure out what it possibly could be. This is another piece of evidence that had to go through a declassification process before it could be released to the public. Makes you wonder what other video footage and potential signs of alien life the government might be hiding from us in a file filing cabinet labeled classified. Number 3. Chicago O'Hare. In November 2006 in Chicago, Illinois, airline staff and pilots alike were shocked by what they had witnessed. Multiple people reported seeing what they described as a flying saucer in the air. It was an overcast day and the UFO seemed to be just hovering over the Chicago O'Hare airport terminal. They then described how it seemed to shoot up into the air incredibly quickly, so fast that it punched a hole through the cloud cover above it. The FAA, or Federal Aviation Administration, described it as simply being a strange weather phenomenon and they wouldn't be investigating it, so don't worry about it. Of course, that's what they want us to think. But so many people at once reporting seeing a flying saucer shooting through the clouds doesn't really sound like a weather phenomenon to me. One flight traffic control official said, "To fly 7 million light years to O'Hare and then have to turn around and go home because your gate was occupied is simply unacceptable." Number 2. SETI readings. Now let's go back to the SETI project again. If you've somehow already forgotten by now, that refers to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Back in 2003, they were using a large telescope in Puerto Rico to re-examine around 200 sections of the sky that had all previously shown unexplained radio signals. All of the signals had disappeared except for one, which had actually become stronger. It came from a spot between the constellations Pisces and Aries where there aren't any known stars or planets. The signal was emitting the frequency for hydrogen, the most common element which both absorbs and emits energy. Some astronomers believing that this is the most likely element aliens might use to send a message to us for this reason. The signal from this spot in space has now been recorded a total of 3 times, and has left many people wondering if it is truly a signal coming from aliens. Number 1. The Phoenix Lights. On March 13th in 1997, an event took place that was referred to as Lights over Phoenix, or the Phoenix Lights phenomenon. On this day, hundreds of witnesses reported seeing otherworldly lights across Arizona, Nevada, and northern Mexico. There were 2 main events. The first being a giant V-shaped aircraft that had 5 lights on it, maybe thrusters, though it apparently didn't make any sound. Then later that night, there were a series of red and orange lights in the sky that didn't appear to move at all. And while air traffic control employees could see the lights in the sky, they couldn't see them on their radars. The governor of the state of Arizona at the time said, "I'm a pilot and I know just about every machine that flies. It was bigger than anything I've ever seen. It remains a great mystery." And it really does remain a mystery. To this day, nobody seems to have any real or solid explanation for what the large spacecraft and the lights might have been. It was said that it was a military flare drop, but this came after their original statement that they had no planes in the air, and even a recreation of the event didn't line up with what people had seen, flares flickering and burning out after only a few seconds. I have an explanation though, it was alien.
Kicking off our list at number 10, the reindeer gift. We'll turn the clocks back to 1941 right off the hop. When the Germans were attacking the Soviet Union, it was of course one of the biggest attacks in history. Britain and the United States had to send over weapons, supplies, anything really just to keep them afloat, just to keep them in the fight. Now they sent these supplies through the Arctic Circle, that was the only route, but of course it was littered with U-boats, you know, war stuff. So thankfully the British HMS Trident was there to watch the waters, and in turn the Soviets were able to fight on. As a gift, as a thank you rather, the Soviets sent the captain of the Trident, they sent him a live reindeer that the British of course had to accept because it was ill-mannered if you don't. So they had to keep a 6-foot tall, real-life living reindeer on a submarine. Must be comfortable, awesome. Imagine the smell. Her name was Pollyanna and they brought her on board through a torpedo tube. She was tiny, she's the cutest little thing. She was a crew member for 6 weeks, which is honestly hilarious because you know some of those guys got way too attached, you know for sure. She slept better than most, if I'm being honest. She shared her room in the captain's quarters. Again, imagine the smell. I don't know, is it worth it? I've always wanted a baby goat growing up, so this is kind of the closest thing. I'm jealous, I'm weirdly jealous. Number 9, Stalin Photoshop. Deepfakes are getting out of hand. I have no idea what's real or what's fake anymore. To be honest, I'm not even Taylor. I'm actually Olivia doing a list right now, but it's been deepfaked so well that you believe it. Modern technology is really making it hard to tell what's real and what's not, but it goes back. Back in 1939, a photo of Stalin was published, and And he looks normal. He actually looks kind of great. Some would say he looks way too good. You know what I mean? He was touching up photos as far back as 1939, just airbrushing, just digitally removing all those zits and stuff. Like, really? That far back? But even if you got a photo with Stalin, there's a chance that you yourself would be digitally removed. Like Nikolai Yevtsov, for example, the leader of the NKVD. He was in a photo with Stalin, but around 1937, Nikolai was responsible for orders that had over 1 million people arrested, so it wasn't ideal to be in a photo with Nikolai at the time. So he was denounced, imprisoned, and he died in 1940. So Stalin had him digitally erased and replaced in a photo. That's pretty hilarious. I don't know, this man was ahead of his time via Photoshop. How did he do it? How did they do it? No one knows. Number 8, Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. Nice, I remember this one. I heard about this on LimeWire. That was cool. Heard about that at full volume. This was a huge presidential scandal. Back when you know, didn't happen every other week and stuff, this was a big deal. It was 1998 and Clinton's White House intern Monica Lewinsky was 22 years old at the time. Yeah, young. When you think back to all this old history, you're like, oh, they were this. No, very young, extremely young. They had a from 1995 to 1997, despite what LimeWire told us. Lewinsky said she hooked up with Bill 9 different times at the White House, and apparently, according to her schedule, Hillary Clinton was at the White House for at least 7 of those times. She's like, what's going on in there, huh? Is that my... Who is that? Number 7, adhesive bras. We'll liven this up a little bit with some vintage history it's kind of funny. It's pretty funny. Let's talk about sticky bras, shall we? What a mess this was, oh my. Back in 1949, Life magazine released an article that caught everybody's attention, obviously. This was news, this was like a new technology that was being announced. It was May 16th, 1949, and the article read, for 5,000 years, clothes have been draped, tied, buttoned, pinned, and buckled on the human form. This year, for the first time in history, drumroll, they will be glued on. What in the world? How? This is witchcraft. How did that happen? Just 1, 2, that's it? That's easy. Inventor Charles Langs changed the game, or he thought he did, in 1949. He made these bra cups that would stick to you with adhesive. This, special glue. This specific adhesive was promised to leave behind no residue, it was supposed to be painless, yet at the same time, stay glued on even if you were to jump into a pool from a 10-foot diving board. That was the sell. Yeah, well, that's not true. That's definitely not true. Well, Langs ended up selling the company to Textron later on, and the product ultimately failed.
In our number 6 spot today, we have this neighborhood nuclear test. This photo shows a mother and her young son looking out the window and witnessing a nuclear test explosion from the comfort of their own home in 1953. Like, what? Imagine seeing that from your window now in 2021. People would be going wild. Of course, any kind of nuclear test should be done as far away from where people live as possible. I know it's not like the test was being done in their front yard or anything, but still, I certainly wouldn't be comfortable with them testing a nuclear bomb anywhere near the place I live. This photo was of course taken before the effects of nuclear radiation from these kind of explosions were publicly understood. Actually, people have suggested that the public knowledge of these kinds of side effects were suppressed during this time in order to avoid controversy about them testing these kinds of weapons in your neighborhood. While that would of course be something insane to witness firsthand, thankfully the now widely known health risks associated with this sort of thing has caused this to not be a common occurrence. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Boston Marathon. This photo comes to us from 1967 and it depicts the struggles that Catherine Switzer went through in order to be the first female to finish the Boston Marathon. This photo shows race organizers as well as other participants trying to stop her from running the marathon that she trained for and was more than capable of completing. She has written a book that explains in great detail all the things she went through that day and how the critiques and opinions about a woman running the race started even before she had registered to run. People in our history like Catherine are incredibly important, as well as photos like these, because they show when people were literally trying to drag her down, she just kept on running. In our number 4 spot today, we have a traffic jam. On Sunday, September 3rd, 1967, Sweden changed from driving on the left-hand side of the road to driving on the right-hand side of the road. Why? Well, I'm not exactly sure considering people downvoted the idea before it was implemented and it cost a ton of money to make the switch. Not to mention it's also super confusing for basically everyone, and when we're talking about driving, the simpler the better. Traffic lights had to be reversed, road signs changed, intersections redesigned, lines on the roads repainted, buses modified, and bus stops moved. What happened when the change was implemented? Well, that's what this photo will show you. Absolute chaos. However, after the initial shock, things did start to get get better, as because drivers were much more cautious in the time following the switch, the number of traffic accidents actually dropped for a little while, before inevitably rising again. Was the switch worth it? Well, no one is sure about that, but what are they gonna do? Change it back? In our number 3 spot today, we have the 3 Jacksons. On August 21st, 1934, 3 fearless acrobats known as the 3 Jacksons, Jarlee Smith, Jewel Waddick, and Jimmy Kerrigan, all performed a routine on the edge of the Empire State Building, which is when this photo was captured. It is said that these 3 toured as an acrobatic trio, and this stunt the photo captured was done at 1,245 feet. According to officials from the Empire State Building, it is said that this was the first time the stunt was attempted, and to this day, it has never been done again, which makes a lot of sense. While this photo is absolutely incredible and is such a testament not only to the trust they shared, but also their abilities as acrobats, I don't know who in their right mind would try to recreate this. We already have one, and I think we can just all be happy with that. In our number 2 spot today, we have the man who fell from space. Vladimir Komarov was a cosmonaut, Soviet test pilot, and aerospace engineer. He was one of the most highly experienced and qualified people, which is exactly why he was chosen for some of the very first space missions. He became the first Soviet cosmonaut to fly into space twice. Unfortunately, however, on one of these missions, things went seriously awry. A parachute failure caused his capsule to crash into the ground after re-entry on the 24th of April in 1967. He literally fell from space, and regardless of if you know anything about space and re-entry, that would have been absolutely terrifying and awful. He of course didn't make it, but the entire process left his remains almost unrecognizable. This photo shows his colleagues looking onto his remains before he was laid to rest. The contributions of people like Vladimir have allowed us to go further into space and understand more than we ever could have imagined. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Gadget. This photo shows the first ever atomic bomb, and it comes to us from 1945. Called the Gadget, this bomb was an implosion plutonium device that was detonated in the Trinity test in 1945. This photo shows someone sitting next to it, so casually, like it's a PB&J sandwich and not this world-changing device. The Trinity test was the very first time a nuclear weapon was detonated, and the Gadget was actually the same design as the bomb that was later detonated over Nagasaki, Japan on August 9th, 1945. There's such an eerie nature about this photo and the seemingly casual behavior of the man next to it. Did he know what this was about to unleash? Perhaps. But maybe not. Alright, starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the reflecting pool. This is one of the creepiest or most chilling images ever taken. It depicts a young girl in a graveyard who is looking down at her reflection in a pond. Okay, maybe a little eerie, but not exactly chilling. What really makes this photo what it is, however, that there are seemingly 2 different reflections looking back up at the little girl. No one knows who this girl is, where she is, or when this photo was taken, but it is estimated to have come from somewhere around the early 1900s. This photo was analyzed, and it has been said that it is unaltered or edited. Who knows how this photo was possible? Maybe there was some sort of invisible entity standing beside her that we could only see the reflection of, like a reverse vampire or something. In our number 8 spot today, we have Bikini Island. Bikini in the Marshall Islands was once inhabited by around 170 islanders until 1945 rolled around. The US president at the time, Harry Truman, ordered that the military continue to test nuclear weapons just in case they were needed in the future, since this was just shortly after the end of World War II. Unfortunately, Bikini was the place that was chosen to be the testing site, since all planes and ships traveled on routes that weren't close to the area. The residents of the island were asked to vacate, quote, for the good of mankind and to end all world wars, to which they of course obliged, under the impression that they would one day be able to move back. Test weapons were detonated on the reef itself, on the sea, in the air, and underwater, and this photo shows what was happening during just one of those tests, and it wasn't even the largest one. Although the former residents of Bikini were promised that they would one day be able to return home, the island still remains uninhabited because of the mass amounts of radiation that still exists there. In our number 8 spot today, we have this huge grasshopper. This photo is allegedly undoctored, or at least that's what people once believed, but as it turns out, this photo actually comes from a line of joke postcards. Thank God. Apparently it was a hilarious hit back in the day to create postcards depicting a super ungodly large
large kind of grasshopper. Like the kind that would make me line up first for a trip to Mars if I saw one hopping around here on Earth. Or should I say, leaping. Like for a second, just imagine. With how high regular tiny grasshoppers can jump, this thing would be jumping into the clouds for sure. Also, like, what would it eat? No thank you to large bugs, especially ones that can jump. I'm just so glad that this one turned out to be fake. Even though it's fake, I wish this was still one that they withheld from the public. And our number 7 spot today, we have these prohibition barrels. The prohibition was the outlaw of the consumption of alcohol, which was done with a ban being placed on the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcohol by the US government from 1920 to 1933. This ban certainly did not stop people from producing or consuming alcohol, it was just done in sneakier ways. The black market for alcohol was booming as people began to drink redistilled industrial alcohol instead. This photo shows how big the black market industry for alcohol was, as it shows a massive stack of liquor barrels that were collected by the authorities in 1924 about to be set ablaze. The people look so tiny standing next to this insane amount of alcohol. While the prohibition is generally regarded as a failure, the biggest failure it caused was the unintended organized crime it put into life in America.
Coming in at number 6, Dagu. Not every sign of alien life has to do with a UFO sighting, sometimes the signs are a bit more subtle. Dating back roughly to between the years of 14,000 and 400 BC, ancient Japan was known for crafting small human-like statues out of clay called Dagu. These statues usually measure between 4 to 12 inches, and while the exact reason for their construction remains under speculation, there are 2 main theories. The first is that Dagu were created as part of an ancient healing and fertility ritual, which could very well be true. However, the second one is a little more intriguing as it involves aliens. Now, if you take a look at these statues, they don't just look like a normal human statue. They have a strange, bulbous sort of look to them with large beanie baby eyes and kind of appear to be wearing what some have described as a stylized spacesuit. That, along with the helmeted head, has created a ton of speculation around if they were in fact modeled after aliens who visited ancient Japan and made contact with its inhabitants. I suppose we might never know for sure, but it's definitely an interesting theory. Coming in at number 5, Wandjina. For a long time, a lot of indigenous culture was passed down orally through stories. One of these such stories from Australian Aboriginal mythology talks about spirits named the Wandjina, and as they tell it, the Wandjina came down from the sky and created the earth as well as all of its inhabitants. Then, when the spirit found the place they would die, they painted their image on cave walls and entered a nearby watering hole. These paintings were then refreshed by indigenous people as a method of generating their life force. But what is intriguing about this tale in particular is that these spirits are depicted all over in the form of ancient rock paintings and appear to date back about 4,000 years. Plus, around the heads of the Wandjina are lines or blocks of color seemingly depicting lightning coming out of their helmets, which I mean is definitely a little suspicious. And many believers have been quick to point out the acute resemblance to the description of greys given by alleged alien abductees. If you don't know, greys are pretty much the classic depiction of an alien and are thought to be one of the extraterrestrial races, with UFO-ologists claiming they make up about 40% of reported abductions and sightings in the US. But could greys have come down, created life on Earth, and then disappeared into the night? I mean, maybe. Who knows? Coming in at number 4, a flaming shield. Similarly to the Roman historical report, other cultures too recorded significant happenings, and the Annales Lauricesnis Maiores, which recorded much of history between 680 AD and 829 AD in what is now modern-day Germany, is definitely filled with some mysterious and interesting stories. One tale in particular took place during the time where battalions of Saxon soldiers were attacking, and it details as the attack progressed, suddenly a bizarre object appeared in the skies overhead. The potential UFO was described as the likeness of 2 large flaming shields, reddish in color and appearing as though it was floating in the skies above them. Apparently the object was so frightening that the advancing Saxon army abandoned the fight and retreated back to safety, something that would have been incredibly unusual for them. Now, the only hole to poke in this is that the author is unknown, but it is widely accepted accepted that writers of the time would record events as they happened, and that these stories would be compiled at a later date into the finished work. So just because we don't know who wrote it doesn't mean we don't know for sure it didn't happen. Coming in at number 3, lizard people. One of the wildest conspiracies out there is the belief that there is a race of half human, half lizard people that are taking over the world. Now, I will admit, this one is a little trickier for me to get behind for several reasons. However, after finding out about this piece of the puzzle, I am definitely a little curious. Although the conspiracy wasn't popularized until the 1990s, in the beginning of the 20th century, archaeologist Harry Reginald Hall made an unsettling discovery that definitely brought up a lot of questions. The archaeological site in question is referred to as Tal al-Ubaid and has served as a gold mine for ancient artifacts. However, by far, the strangest uncovered artifacts have to be the multiple series of lizard humanoid statues found by Harry in 1919. From what archaeologists can deduce, they don't appear to represent gods, as they aren't depicted in ceremonious poses, and so it has led many to believe they could be early depictions of the race of lizard people. I mean, I won't lie, these little statues are super creepy, and maybe one of the only times the lizard people theory has got me feeling a little suspicious. I don't know, do you think these figurines really could be proof of the evil lizard race invading the planet? Coming in at number 2, an alien mummy? Mummies are everywhere in Egypt, so while they are definitely interesting, they rarely cause any kind of huge excitement in the archaeological community, unless it's a particularly special one. Well, as I'm sure you've put together at this point, a few years ago, Dr. Victor Lubeck, who was a retired professor from the University of Pennsylvania, uncovered a strange mummy that made him question what he was seeing. Discovered in a small pyramid near Senusret II's pyramid was the mummy of a small, unidentified creature with seemingly no resemblance to that of a human body or known animal. To make things even more strange, buried along with the humanoid mummy were unusual objects Victor was unable to identify. What was clear was that whatever this was mummified with great respect and care, and an inscription was found on the tomb that roughly translates to star or sent from heaven. The running conspiracy theory is that it was an alien who was involved in some way with advising the pharaoh Senusret II, which would explain his royal treatment and careful mummification. I mean, it's definitely unsettling and absolutely an unusual find. But is it an alien? I mean, I guess it could be. And last up today on our number 1 spot, the Sumerian civilization. The ancient Sumerians were a group of people that suddenly became established in Mesopotamia circa 2900 BCE. No one is quite sure where they came from originally, but there is a general conspiracy that is well documented that their origins were not from planet Earth. According to a series of ancient texts, the Sumerians were created by an alien race called the Anunnaki, who came to Earth after their planet Nibiru collided with another planet in the solar system. The aliens found themselves in a short supply of gold and saw that Earth was in high supply, so they landed here and supposedly created a new species that was half alien, half human to mine the gold for them. Now, it does sound a little crazy, but the Sumerians did have advanced scientific, agricultural, and technological knowledge, as well as an acute understanding of the solar system, which was highly advanced at their time. Researchers have recorded clay pot batteries that still contained electrodes, a flyable model airplane, as well as an unexplainable capability to cut large stones with exact precision. Not to mention, similarly to the Egyptians, Sumerians seemed familiar and depicted drawings of rockets, airplanes, and helicopters on certain artifacts from their time too. And if that didn't make you even just a bit curious, they have also discovered mitochondrial DNA evidence linked to a woman in Africa dating more than 100,000 years ago near a gold mine. While of course we might never know for sure, the legend of the Anunnaki has made even some of the biggest skeptics question the reality of aliens.
The first image is a screen grab from a video filmed by a US Marine officer on the
20th of April in 2021 on a military base in 29 Palms, California. After the release of the photograph, multiple Marines came forward to confirm the existence of an aircraft, saying that while the photo showcases only the triangle-shaped formation of bright lights, in person the men were able to make out the black body of the aircraft as well. The unidentified flying object is said to have hovered for 10 minutes in the air before it suddenly vanished without any trace. The men were able to rule out flares for being the cause of the mysterious lights, but were never able to figure out exactly what they saw that night. However, it appears the footage has not been taken lightly, as the Pentagon has started an investigation into just what exactly was seen on the night of April 20th of 2021 in the skies above the 29 Palms military base. Next up, we have a series of photographs taken by cosmonaut Ivan Vanger in August of 2020 whilst aboard the International Space Station that appears to depict 5 unidentified flying objects flying at the same speed while maintaining the same distance between each other as well as their surroundings, moving in a straight line just above the Earth's curved horizon visible in the night sky. Vangar, both surprised and curious, took to Twitter, now named X, to share the footage in hopes of getting some clarity as to exactly what he was looking at. In an exciting unfolding of events, his tweet was picked up by the Russian space agency Roscosmos, and a spokesperson revealed that experts were in fact studying the video in an attempt to determine what exactly Vangar had managed to capture. Did you guys know that Japan was a major hotbed for UFO activity? Because I didn't. But apparently the Pentagon does? In fact, UFO sightings are so common in Japan that its military has reportedly ordered all pilots to disclose any and all identified flying objects directly to the Japanese government. Not only that, but Japanese self-defense forces have also undergone extensive training in relation to UFO sighting protocol. To date, 6 alleged encounters between pilots and UFOs have been reported to the Japanese government, one of which was recorded, and depicts 10 white circular balls flying through the skies of Osaka in Japan. While the government has yet to publicly comment on any of the incidents, the update of self-defense protocol alone is pretty telling. The next image was shared by a pretty reputable source, National Geographic. The image was captured by Sergio Loaiza on September 4th of 1971 during an aerial survey of Lake Cote. Everything seemed pretty normal until the photos were taken back to Loaiza's development lab, where he noticed something very strange. A metallic flying aircraft, estimated to have a diameter of 160 feet, was located in the corner of one of the photographs. When he presented the photos to his superiors at the National Geographic Institute, they shut him down quick, forbidding Sergio as well as his colleagues from sharing any information of what they had seen that day. In 1979, however, the photograph was leaked, and the object that appeared in the image was officially classified as an unidentified flying object. In 2021, the existence of the object was again confirmed after the original copy of the photograph was scanned, and it was revealed that the UFO's presence was more than just a scratch on the lens or a piece of dust in the wind. So what do you think it was? Let us know in the comments.
Number 6, nuclear site list. Alright, back to the dark stuff. Here on Most Amazing, we love lists, right? I'm not sure if you can tell. Smash that thumbs up, hit subscribe, yada yada, we love it. But apparently the US government also fancies a list or two. Who thought? Back when Obama was still running the show, a report was delivered to Congress, or rather it was supposed to be. The 266-page report featuring, every nook and cranny about the US nuclear program. It was released publicly on the government printing office's website in draft form. Draft form, couldn't have been easier, just a casual PDF that shows us maps with stockpiled fuel used for nuclear warheads. Awesome, right next to your resume. Imagine that, so convenient. How does this even happen? I thought this type of stuff could never happen, right? Well, MIT professor John M. Deutsch said that these screw-ups do of course happen, and it's normal, and this one here isn't a serious breach. I mean, it certainly sounds serious, but okay. We'll just have to trust the government. Number 5, UFOs in the ocean. This video here was leaked in the last couple of years. You've probably seen it, hopefully not. This would be a great day. The footage itself was recorded in 2019 in San Diego. Now the Pentagon has since of course confirmed its authenticity, and the UAP, the unidentified aerial phenomenon here, is sphere-shaped and it's flying at extremely high speeds. There's no exhaust, no propulsion system whatsoever. It's just a metal ball whipping by San Diego, and now we're questioning our beliefs, so that's fun. The sphere vanished into the water afterwards, into the ocean, and then was never seen ever again. Number 4, radar footage. Now normally when we see leaked footage, be it of UAPs or leaked documents, whatever, it's always the worst quality. Like that one, not the best, right? Not quite 4K. It's hard to believe when military footage is poor quality, right? Like how can we see photos of black holes and not even have a photo of a UAP yet, right? What's going on here? Well, Jeremy Corbell, he's here to help. Jeremy? What if he just walked in? That would be crazy. He's not here. That's insane. Jeremy took to Twitter in May 2021 sharing footage of US Navy ships being swarmed by UFOs. Like more than one. Sorry, UAPs. We're not gonna call them that anymore. Now this time we have radar footage, and that's pretty sweet. That's different. It came from the Combat Information Center aboard the USS Omaha. The 46-second clip was originally recorded July 15th, 2019. You can even hear people in the background reacting to what's happening in real time. You hear panic in their voices. These military personnel in the background, you can overhear them talking about how fast the objects are moving on the radar. So, seems very believable this time, right? It's not just a grainy footage. It's like a live reaction kind of. And if he's spooked, we're spooked, right? Number 3, Watergate. I have to include Watergate, right? It's one of the biggest scandals in US history. Right in the middle of 1972, there were 5 men who were all arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. It was clear that they intended on bugging the place, right? It was fishy, it was obvious, they looked like and spy kids, right? They were up to no good. Now as the year went on, the election came closer and closer, and all of a sudden out of the woodwork comes this anonymous source who fed information to Washington Post that the Watergate bugging incident was a massive campaign of political spying and sabotage kicked off by none other than President Nixon himself. It was kicked off by his re-election and directed by officials of the White House. It was a whole planned thing. Now despite this information leak and it being reported to the news, Nixon was still re-elected. Now these men were clearly linked to a fundraising group for Nixon, but his administration just kept denying any involvement, right? That's the key. Deny, deny, deny. It wasn't until later that year in 1972 when reporters Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, they came forward and exposed everything. Now we got the truth. They exposed the administrator's role in the entire scandal, how they had an inside source, an FBI agent named Mark Felt. It was a whole thing. This ultimately led to Nixon resigning in 1974, the first ever president to do so. Yeah, that's how you know you got caught, when you have to resign. Know what I mean? Number 2, shadow brokers. Back in August 2016, a group named the Shadow Brokers were the talk of the town. And with that name, how can you not be, right? The shadow brokers would steal cyber weapons from an NSA hacking unit and then proceed to sell them online to the highest bidder. Now this sounds made up. This sounds like it's from a movie. This is crazy, right? Now these tools in question, these cyber weapons, they've been used by many countries and many not so great sounding schemes. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, you name it, these cyber attacks can happen anywhere, right? The 2019 ransomware cyber attack, that's one example. This incident was connected to the shadow brokers. So whoever this mysterious group is, it still remains a mystery and still sounds made up as shit. It sounds like a DC Comics villain. It's insane. And finally, number 1, motorized roller skates. We'll end on a fun one, because, you know, why not? This last one they've been working on for a very long time and we still can't crack it, right? This is the craziest thing I've ever seen working on this channel, so I gotta end with it. Motorized roller skates. What a nightmare this would be. Imagine if this worked out. Even Elon Musk would see this and be like, no, that's crazy. This photo was taken at the Sunoco station in Hartford, Connecticut. Now context aside, this is an odd one. A guy with a briefcase is filling up at the gas station and he's wearing roller skates. That would look bad today. You would have SWAT teams rolling up if you saw that, right? It's 1956 and that futuristic looking man right there is Mike Dreschler. Now at the time he was working for a Detroit skate company, but he was very close to gas powered skates. They would have cost around $250, which today is around $2,400. And its max speed was 17 miles an hour. Again, imagine that in the closing act of like a Mission Impossible movie. That's crazy. Now obviously the public wasn't supposed to see this. They feared that it would encourage folks to get creative on their own and, you know, launch their way to work. So yeah, don't make rocket skates with gasoline. Thanks.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Barrier Canyon pictographs. Located in the southwest, the Barrier Canyon is a remote area in Utah. There you will find amazing pictographs that date back to thousands of years ago. Here's the thing, people are like, bro, those pictures look an awful lot like aliens. Most of the figures displayed there are quite odd. They are around 8 feet tall and shaped like a human but have no arms, legs, ears, or noses. They do, however, have big alien-like eyes. Some have been drawn with free-floating eyes, or wings, or with serpents around their hands or above their heads. Other paintings are of animals and humans, but the humans aren't drawn nearly as big as the 8-foot tall weird creatures. The paintings are said to have been done by mixing blood and clay and possibly urine as a binder. Upon analyzing them, they found hair from a paintbrush that dates back to 6750 BCE, meaning maybe people back then were in contact with these humanoid alien type creatures. I mean, they would have had to had a big impact on their life in order for them to have been painted. Moving on at number 9, we have the rock paintings. For years, archaeologists in Sharma, India have been baffled by these weird ancient rock paintings. The paintings are around 10,000 years old and they look like they depict aliens and UFOs. Archaeologist Junior Back said, and I quote, "The findings suggest that humans in prehistoric times may have seen or imagined beings from other planets." Some of the paintings show these weird alien-shaped figures with massive heads, whereas other drawings are of what appears to be UFO spaceships. In other pictures, these weird humanoid figures are wearing what appears to be spacesuits. In fact, locals in the village would worship the paintings and tell great stories about small people coming down from the sky in round-shaped flying objects, abducting people, and then never returning. So, were the prehistoric people just super creative, or were they actually greeted by these aliens? Moving on to number 8, we have Saint Wolfgang and the Devil. This painting was created in the 15th century by famous German Renaissance painter Michael Pacher. It was painted based on the legend about Saint Wolfgang tricking the devil into building a church. So yes, that green guy with the weird face on his ass is supposed to be the devil. But people are like, really? That's an alien. I mean, yes, I admit that this creature doesn't look like a traditional devil, but over the years the devil has been depicted in a number of different forms, including something like this. But no, a number of people strongly believe that it's not the devil he was in contact with, but it was aliens instead, and apparently aliens have faces on their bums. Moving on at number 7, we have the Crucifixion of Jesus. Okay, this one is wild. Buckle your seatbelts. So take a look at this painting from 1350. It was created by an unknown artist for the Decani Monastery. The artist signed his name Serge, but there's no historical records of anyone with such name. So right off the bat, people are like, okay, so who created this piece? Especially because in the top right and left hand corners of the piece there are 2 UFOs with passengers inside. In the right corner, the pilot in the UFO seems to be looking all the way back at the craft behind him. Now, I don't know about you, but no normal human being can do that with their neck unless they're an alien or an owl. On top of it all, this work would have had to been approved on the detail or else the whole piece would have been repainted. So someone saw this and was like, yep, that's accurate, looks good, meaning aliens were present during Jesus' crucifixion? Also, they didn't have spacecrafts back then, or any flying things. But those 2 people are certainly flying in something, alright? So what's the deal? Well, one explanation is that those 2 UFO things are supposed to represent the sun and the moon, or 2 divine beings watching over. But a lot of people are just like, no, they're aliens.
Next up, we have footage that comes to us straight from the declassifieds. Remember how I told you at the beginning of the video that the government quite literally copped to the fact that they have been hiding the existence of UFOs for years? Well, they did, and they came with receipts. On the 15th of January in 2023, while surveilling an MQ-9 Reaper aircraft, an unidentified aerial presence was captured moving at speeds unreachable by any of Earth's modern-day technological advances. Not only this, but as the object whizzed through the field of view of the camera lens, it appeared to leave behind an atmospheric wake before disappearing completely into the sky. Guys, if you have any, please leave your UFO and alien stories in the comments. I would love to hear about your experiences with any of these kind of things. Next up, we have arguably the most beautiful alien-assuming photograph I have ever seen. The photo was taken in 2004 by a retired Royal Air Force officer while on vacation in Sri Lanka. The site was described as some kind of colorful giant donut in the sky with hues of oranges, pinks, purples, and whites. After its capture, the photograph was turned into the Royal Air Force Flyingdales base in North Yorkshire in England, where it became a classified document held by the Ministry of Defence. The image has since been declassified, of course, and is now available for public viewing, but there is still a lot of mystery surrounding the photo as well as the photographer, as his identity, along with any other information regarding the incident, is pretty much non-existent. I mean, come on, it's a giant glowing light in the sky. You're really telling me no one else saw this and that there's no other information out there other than the fact that the photo exists? Oh, yeah, and not only that, but it was deemed classified by the British Ministry of Defence, so I'm thinking there's something else going on here. Okay, I bet you didn't know that another major hotbed for extraterrestrial, UFO, and unidentified aerial phenomenon activity was Brazil. I mean, I did, but maybe you didn't. In fact, this kind of thing is so popular in Brazil that they have an annual day of recognition for these sightings known as the Night of the UFO, which came to be after a major event took place in 1986. On the night of May 19th, a series of unidentified flying objects were seen in the skies of Brazil, and even more non-visual objects were detected via radar across the skies of 4 Brazilian states. Of course, at this time, any and all knowledge the government had on the event was extremely classified. In May of 2012, however, Brazil's Freedom of Information Act went into place, after which the public demanded the release of all the documents relating to the incident. The government complied, and not only released written documents of the events, but also a series of photographs depicting strange activity within the skies above Brazil. Although the images of what appeared to be nothing more than squiggles and clouds of smoke didn't provide much clarity, a statement made by the Minister of Aeronautics did. He said, "This command is of the opinion that the phenomena are solid and reflect, in a certain way, intelligence, due to the ability to follow and maintain a distance from observers, as well as to fly information." After this statement was made, the Brazilian government has still not been able to confirm exactly what took place the day the Night of the UFOs was born. Next, we have a photo taken in 1990 by 2 Scottish chefs who were working in a hotel near the area in which the photograph was taken. After a long day of work, it appears the 2 men had decided to take a hike in an attempt to blow off some steam. While this walk wouldn't end up being incredibly relaxing, it would be wildly exciting, as not long after the 2 men had set off on their journey along the Calvine Scottish countryside, they noticed something hovering above them in the sky. The object was not one that either of the men could identify, and so they pulled out their cameras in an attempt to document the 100-foot flying aircraft instead. The photos, which have been analyzed and show no signs of manipulation, capture the object being circled by a jet plane. They thought the incident was incredibly strange and even newsworthy, so the 2 turned the footage over to the local newspaper for publication, but the images were seized by the British Ministry of Defence and were never released. Until 32 years later, that is, by David Clark, who, unbeknownst to the ministry, had kept a photocopy of one of the original images. The identity of the 2 men was never revealed, nor did they ever come forward to share their story after the images had been seized by the ministry, begging the question of what exactly they saw and what exactly the government was trying to cover up. A photograph taken of an unidentified aircraft lit up by military spotlights in Los Angeles, California, is next on the list. The photograph, which documents an event so big it later became referred to as the Battle of Los Angeles or the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, was taken on February 23rd of 1942, just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. On the night the photo was taken, all of Los Angeles was under blackout, as directed by the US military. While the lights on the ground had been turned off, the sky above had been lit up by a myriad of strange objects. The military opened fire, and onlookers stood absolutely stunned as 1,400 rounds of ammunition appeared to have no effect on the unidentified flying object. Smoke filled the sky, and when it cleared, not a single craft was to be found in the sky or on the ground. Shrapnel that appeared to have ricocheted off the target resulted in the death of 5 civilians. Furthermore, 3 were killed in car accidents due to the chaos of the event, and 2 more of heart attacks due to the stress of the 2-hour-long attack. And finally, we have a handful of screen grabs from a video taken by Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich whilst flying an 18F Super Hornet fighter jet over the Pacific Pacific Ocean near San Diego during a training mission for the United States Navy. The footage, taken in November of 2004, was captured after Dietrich was asked to investigate a suspicious object that had been seen dropping from 80,000 feet down to the surface of the ocean and then vanishing. When Alex and their colleague arrived on the scene, the ocean's surface, where the object had been reported, appeared as though it was boiling. Moments after arriving to investigate, a strange, elongated white object came into view and was captured on video hovering above the water before it disappeared into the sky at an impossible speed, leaving no wake in the oceans below. While the footage has been confirmed to be authentic by the United States Department of Defense, the object itself, along with its origins, remains a mystery.
Number 10. Astronaut sightings. Who better to trust about what's going on in space than people who have actually been to space before? That's right, numerous astronauts over the years have reported seeing things that they think might be UFOs. Buzz Aldrin was one of the astronauts aboard the Apollo 11, and during their journey they all reported seeing flying objects. Of course, space debris exists, and it could just be some metal junk that was adrift in space. But then, why did they report that the objects appeared to be following them? When they thought that it might have just been a detached part of the rocket that was flying alongside them, they were informed that this piece was actually 6,000 miles away from them, and they definitely wouldn't have been able to see it from that far away. He also said that when they brought it up, they were briefed to not talk about what they had seen out in space. Well, the government can try all they want to cover things up, but eventually word always gets out. Number 9. Paintings. Now let's go well beyond spaceships and astronauts and move into the far more distant past, because alien sightings certainly aren't a new thing and seem to have been around for centuries. One piece of evidence that people often cite is a painting titled The Madonna with Saint Giovannino. It was painted in the 15th century by Dominic Ghirlandaio and appears to depict a UFO flying around in the background, its shape matching up with people's frequent depictions of flying saucers as being alien spacecrafts. There also appear to be beams of light coming out from the bottom of the ship, and this has led people to believe that it is unmistakably an alien craft and not just something else placed up in the sky. And if you take a look at it, it does seem hard to believe that it could be anything else, as what other dark object would make sense to be floating in the sky like that? If you have any ideas, let me know what else you think it might be. Number 8. The Tic Tac UFO. Back in 2004 on the coast of California, a US Navy pilot named David Fravor reported seeing something strange. In fact, he reported seeing something that was, quote, something not from this earth. They were about 60 to 100 miles off the coast of California, and he was leading a strike fighter squadron through some exercises when the incident occurred. He said that he saw a tic-tac shaped vessel flying through the air at incredible speeds, but it wasn't just him who saw it. It was also reported by another flight crew who actually followed after the craft and even filmed it. While the footage was originally kept classified, it's now been made available to the public. The case was then published by the New York Times after the Pentagon acknowledged its Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, which is actually the Pentagon's own 21st century study of UFO sightings. Number 7. Wow! Exclamation point. The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, otherwise known as SETI, is a group that, well, searches for extraterrestrial intelligence. In 1977, a large radio telescope outside of Ohio was scanning the skies on behalf of SETI when they picked up a signal that lasted for 72 seconds. The printouts of readings often included low numbers, which was typically just the background noise that the telescope picked up. But then a scientist noticed that there was a sudden string of letters as well as larger numbers. The letters went all the way up to U, which indicated a signal 30 times stronger than the typical background noise. Upon seeing these consecutive letters, which would represent a very strong signal and something potentially alien, he circled them and wrote the word wow followed by an exclamation point in bright red pen. To this day, we've never really seen anything else like it, and the extraordinary readout has yet to ever be duplicated.
In our 6th spot today, we have the Madonna. Painted in the late 1400s, this is a beautiful painting of the Madonna with infant Jesus and St. John. But if you look in the background, there appears to be a weird spacecraft floating in the sky. In fact, it is emitting beams of light, and the man in the back with the dog is looking up at it with his mouth open like, what the heck is this? Like, he's in awe of it. Even the dog is looking up at it like, what the hell is going on here? This craft looks a lot like a UFO. I mean, come on, there's even light rays coming out of it, so what else could it be? Again, people argue saying that maybe it's an angel or some sort of holy entity looking down on her. But there's no wings or a body of an angel, and this wasn't the typical way to portray angels, so it seems quite odd and out of place to say the least. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Leonardo da Vinci's paintings. A lot of people think that Leonardo da Vinci was in contact with aliens and was trying to tell us through hiding secret messages in his paintings. First off, people thought that Leo was way ahead of his time. Like, he was drawing pictures of helicopters in 1493 before it was even a thing. He also talked about ships that could travel underwater, submarines. Like, he came up with a lot of modern day inventions somehow back then. So people were like, okay, he's either a time traveler or an alien, or he's in contact with aliens and they were telling him how to advance society. Now, here comes the freaky part. Someone mirrored and lightened his painting of St. John the Baptist, and it appears as if there's an alien face in there. It is truly quite freaky. It straight up looks like an alien from The Predator or something. Then you have his famous work of art, the Mona Lisa. Turns out if you do the exact same thing to this painting, you also see an alien's face. So, what do you think? Was Leo subtly trying to tell us something? If so, why would he make it so hard for us to find? Also, I want to know who went around like mirroring and lightening these images. Like, were they purposely looking for a coded message? Should we be doing that to all paintings or what? Moving on, at number 4 we have the glorification of the Eucharist. This is another religious painting that might include signs of alien life. So in this painting from the 17th century we see God and Jesus looking out over God's kingdom. But what's weird is that there is this weird round object between the two with antennas sticking out of it. It looks a lot like Russia's Sputnik satellite. Now, the sphere is the creation globe, like to represent Earth and the cosmos. But people argue that if that was so, then how come there's no stars? And how come it looks like it has almost a metallic reflection? And what about the antennas, okay? Some say that it's magic wands, but it can't be because they look like they retract, like antennas. I don't know about this one, okay? There's two theories. One, aliens provided them with such a device, or two, someone is a time traveler. I don't even know anymore. Coming in at number 3, we have no Chiri. This illustration is part of a UFO legend from the 1800s. The fact that back then they had stories talking about spacecrafts and extraterrestrials makes it seem like aliens are indeed real. This Japanese story talked about a sailor finding a weird floating craft in the ocean, which is what this picture depicts. According to the story, the craft was an object made from steel and glass, and was big enough to fit a small human inside. On top of that, they said inside of the craft was a small script that they couldn't decipher. Probably because it was like in an alien language, I don't know. But anyways, what are the odds that this story perfectly describes UFOs and drew them just like we picture them nowadays? In our second spot, we have the Paleolithic rock painting. This for sure is a painting of a UFO spaceship and no one can tell me differently. Like, there's no way this isn't. Like, come on, as a kid, that's how I drew UFOs. What else is it meant to be if it's not an alien spacecraft? Anyways, this painting was found deep inside of a cave in Neo, France. It's dated back to 13,000 BC, which is insane because obviously they didn't have any flying devices back then, so what is this a picture of? Maybe they really did come across a UFO. And in our number 1 spot today we have Dracula's UFO. Not gonna lie, this is another really freaking weird one. This is a 16th century painting of Dracula's castle, like the real life Dracula, aka Vlad the Impaler. Well, hovering right above the castle in the sky is what looks like a UFO spacecraft. Not only that, but in 2014, a tourist photographed a very similar UFO right above a building in the same area. Could it be that Vlad was actually an alien? Like, what if aliens need to feed off of humans to stay alive, and that's why Vlad did what he did? Because in reality, he was an alien, not a vampire. I don't know, man, this is all too weird.
If you were a fan of these rare historical photos, then how about you check out these photos that were actually stolen out of Area 51? Click the video now.